Here's the situation. Senator Patty Murray got called to a Senate hearing about fraud in Medicaid, which is a legitimate topic. Medicaid fraud costs taxpayers billions of dollars every year. And if you're a working person paying into the system, you want to know your money isn't being stolen. That's fair. That's reasonable, you would think. But instead of spending that hearing talking about how to actually catch fraudsters, protect the program, and make sure the money goes to people who actually need it, Senator Murray decided to use her time to go after Trump's pardons. Now, pause for a second and think about that. The hearing was supposed to be about fraud in the system, about waste, about making sure criminals aren't ripping off a program that millions of Americans depend on. And within the first few minutes, Senator Murray pivoted to talk about President Trump. Not about the structural problems in Medicaid, not about the oversight failures that let fraud happen in the first place, not about the fact that both parties have been in charge while this system bled money for decades. She went straight to Trump's pardons, right? And look, I'm not here to defend every pardon Trump ever made. I'm not here to tell you what to think about any of it. But let's be real for a second. If we're going to hold a hearing about fraud, let's actually talk about fraud. And let's actually talk about the system. Let's actually talk about where the money actually goes. Not like hospice fraud in the name of actually elder abuse, I would call it. Basically propping individuals up and doctors who have a whole ring of fraud happening in the hospice care that don't exist, while basically diagnosing and giving our elders medicine that they don't need in California. Medicares and daycares in Minnesota that are actually daycares, basically in the name of Somalian daycare fraud, while individuals and American taxpayers prop up and pay for that daycare for it to exist. And they're basically selective in the name of selectively only allowing individuals like Somalians who are in on it to basically have their child on the books but not actually attend the daycare. That's off topic, but I'm saying the fraud is so spread wide, which is why we understand she pivoting, because she don't want the swamp to actually be drained. And shout out to Dr. Oz and the Trump administration and the fraud department with our vice president doing the work with the fraud task force, baby. But let's talk about where the money actually goes and who's been watching the door, you would think. Because from my perspective, turning a fraud hearing into a campaign speech doesn't catch a single criminal. It doesn't save a single dollar. It just gives people on both sides something to argue about why the actual problems keep getting worse. Right. So let's walk through what Senator Murray actually said, what she left out, and why this kind of political theater is exactly why regular people are tired of watching these hearings. Because when you strip away the talking points, there's a much bigger conversation here about accountability, about who gets to play the fraud card, and about whether either party actually wants to fix the problem or just want to score points off of it. And then you wonder why inflation and the cost of living is so high. You have so much fraud in the name of American taxpayer dollars being waste that doesn't have to be spent. And then you wonder why the cost of living is going up everywhere throughout the country, because fraud is getting taken away. Fraud is taking place, and American taxpayer dollars is monies is getting taken away in the name of fraud. I mean to say, not to mention that we have individuals who come from other countries coming here as an immigrant who are able to just open up these businesses like a hospice care, and the doctors be in on it, like in California that Dr. Oz been covering. And also shout out to Nick. Shout out to Nick Shirley, actually doing the work that these journalists in the mainstream liberal media don't want to do, who is a political commentator, who actually is a journalist doing content on YouTube and being phenomenal at it. So shout out to Nick Shirley as well. But let's get into this. I wanted to say all that because it pisses me off, man. Because you wonder why, if they're giving away all this free Medicaid and free healthcare in the name of actually creating another voter pool and creating another sense of entitlement with handouts and gimmies, and bringing in illegals to cross the border at one point in time to just basically stay in political power on the backs of American taxpayers who continue to work their behind off. And then you wonder why the cost of living is so much, because the cost of living is so high, because the money is going out and all they believe is tax. And there's no money going in because the money is actually not balanced as our founding fathers would want it. That's why we have separations of powers within greed, but checks and balances. But these fools and the Democrats have found a way around it, propping up their judges they preferred in the Supreme Court or in our judicial system throughout the country within these sanctuary states, and et cetera, and working with China to overturn elections and also things like that, right? Can you imagine going worldwide with it, as these Democrats have went, and actually supporting our adversary like Iran when Obama sent over a plane full of cash to help support and boost their enrichment of uranium, which we're trying to take away, while they chant death of America. Sorry, family, but it's mind blowing.
We do need to crack down on fraud, especially in a program like Medicaid that so many Americans really rely on. So, Mr. Ingram, let me just ask you yes or no. You agree we do need to be cracking down on Medicaid fraud and not letting criminals off the hook, yes?
Yes.
Thank you. So I hope my Republican colleagues will use some part of this hearing to condemn President Trump for pardoning criminals who were convicted of major Medicaid fraud. Trump pardoned 5 former executives from Florida who committed serious Medicaid fraud to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. That is pretty bad. Following what was dubbed, quote, the largest healthcare fraud scheme charged by the U.S. Justice Department, valued at over $1 billion in Medicare and Medicaid fraud, Trump commuted the 20-year sentence of a Florida nursing home and assisted living facility executive. So that's even worse. So look, I'm all for major crackdown fraud. I think we all are, but it looks like we've got some pretty good leads starting in the White House. Mr. Schneider, I want to turn to you. What single piece of legislation delivered the largest cuts to Medicaid in American history?
Last year's budget reconciliation bill.
Yep, so everybody knows Republicans' big ugly bill passed more than $1 trillion in healthcare cuts, mostly to Medicaid. Mr. Schneider, how much in tax breaks for the top 1% did Trump's bill contain?
Approximately $1 trillion.
$1 trillion in tax cuts to the top 1%. Mr. Schneider, how many Americans are losing health care because of Trump's big ugly bill?
So in terms of the Medicaid cuts, the latest estimates are approximately 11 million.
11 million. So 0 billionaires lose their health care. They do get $1 trillion in tax cuts. And then over 15 million Americans, including the extended ACA tax credits, lose their health care thanks to Republicans passing $1 trillion in cuts for regular working class people.
They love that line, boy. Regular working class people. While the Democrats have basically worked with the insurance cuts to get basically back end pay on the back end while giving all of this Medicaid and free, Medicaid. Because think about it. If you get free Medicaid and the individual goes to the hospital or get any type of medical work done or get seen, then the insurance company or the hospital actually charges the insurance company whatever they want. But then in exchange of propping up the insurance company, not even you as an individual, if you're a working class American, can be on Medicaid because you won't qualify if you even make like 30,000. If you even work, right? You make 30,000 a year, which is nothing, right? You won't qualify for Medicaid. All right. Now, individuals who don't do nothing and sitting there behind, which thank God that Trump actually made individuals be able to do something with themselves, or I should say, tell them to do something with themselves because they're able-bodied and they should at least work 20 hours before they just sit on there behind and get free welfare and food stamps and Medicaid. And I'm all for help, but there's individuals making this a lifestyle to depend on government for the rest of their lives as basically a lifeline of free. So what I'm saying is, if you got Medicaid, individuals most of the time think, oh, I could get on Medicaid because I don't charge me nothing. I could go wherever I want. Mind you, a working class individual who actually paid a health insurance company still don't get to pick their package. And then they get told what basically covers and what doesn't. Even if they can go anywhere they want in the name of PPO, because PPO, you can go where you want. HMO, you have to get referral from the doctor. Doctor has to sign off. So then you can go to wherever else you're trying to go. Basically, you need the doctor's consent for HMO, right? But I'm saying all that to say that, so you don't get to pick your packages. Your premiums are going up, but then you have individuals who go and get covered with anything in the name of Medicaid, and they go wherever they want. But then the hospitals charge whatever they want because they know you're not paying for it. This is not privatized insurance. This is through the government. So then also the insurance company gets a boatloads of money in return with all these individuals being on it because they pass spending bills. And then a politician on the back end say, look, we'll prop you up with all this money in our bill and keep flushing it in to prop you up to make billions, right? And then you'll make even more dollars because then you'll actually get money from the premiums raised on working class people, which you're slamming. And then you have to pay us on the back end because we're making sure that you're propped up and getting money on the forefront and the front end once we pass bills constantly in the name of working class people. You get the deceiving pattern here, the deceit of acting like you want to help, but you're really hurting. And then you wonder why the affordability is not in which they claim, because it was never about affordability. It was about party over people and enriching themselves, working with the health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, right? Even pushing, like, for example, the vaccine, who wasn't in the best interest of Americans, where many Americans lost their lives. And there was a solution that whole time in which we didn't need to even declare a pandemic because there was already an effective medicine to basically cure COVID. And they suppressed Dr. Stella Emanuel Ford and removed her from Facebook from being vocal about it, while Dr. Fauci ignored a cluster of doctors across the world with their expertise, basically just discredited them and threw them away and censored them. So she talked about Trump pardoning 5 former executives from Florida who were convicted of Medicaid fraud worth tens of millions of dollars. That's true. She talked about Trump committing a 20-year sentence of a Florida nursing home executive named Philip Esformes, who was part of what the Justice Department called the largest healthcare fraud scheme they ever charged, valued at over $1 billion in Medicare and Medicaid fraud. That's also true. And when you hear those numbers, $1 billion, a 20-year sentence commuted, it sounds bad. It sounds like the system doesn't work. It sounds like people with connections get breaks that regular people don't, and that's worth talking about. It's worth asking why certain people get leniency when others don't. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that those communications were beyond question, right? What I will tell you is that if you're going to bring up that in the hearing about fraud, you should also be willing to talk about the fraud that happened under your own watch as well, right? And I'll tell you primarily why Donald Trump pardoned Philip from his 20-year prison sentence involving the nursing home, right? Because legal figures and charitable organizations or a charitable organization argued that his prosecution was deeply fraud, right? Philip as Formas, the nursing home guy that Trump basically pardoned in Florida. And they convinced Trump that federal agents broke strict legal rules by looking at private documents shared between his Formas and his lawyers, making his trial unfair, all right? And while supporters felt freeing him after 4.5 years, corrected an abuse of government power. Critics strongly argued the decision was unjustifiable, as you can see with Miss Patty here, speaking on behalf of that. But I am saying that also mentioning the affordable health care, right, in the name of Obama and, backing the insurance companies and passing bills to prop them up while they slam working class individuals who pay health insurance premiums that don't feel like it covers anything. So I am saying to Miss Patty as well, okay, well, if you feel that way, that's justifiable for Trump's pardon. But what about the fraud happened under your watch as a Democrat? Right? The oversight failures that both parties have allowed, and the fact that this same system has been leaking money long before Trump was ever anywhere near the White House. And here's what this actually looked like in real life. Imagine you own a small business, and every year you notice money missing from the register. So you call a meeting with your managers to figure out who's stealing and how to stop it. But instead of talking about how the security cameras that aren't working, the inventory system that hasn't been updated in 20 years, or the fact that nobody's done a real audit in a decade, thank goodness for Elon Musk and Doge, who came in at the time where they were in and basically got a whole bunch of software engineers and digitized the government so it can be audited effectively. They wanted to keep the old school traditional way because there's loopholes, right? With paper and bunches of boxes of paper sitting in the dungeon down in the Capitol Hill. But just imagine, like, one manager stands up and starts talking about something your former business partner did 5 years ago. Is that relevant? Maybe. But does it fix the hole in your register? No. It just changes the subject. And that's exactly what happened in his hearing. Senator Murray spent her time attacking Trump personally instead of addressing the structural failures that let fraud happen in the first place. And the reality is both parties have been in charge of this system. That's the truth. Both parties have passed budgets. Both parties have appointed officials who were supposed to oversee these programs. So if we're really serious about fraud, let's talk about the whole picture, not just the parts that make the other side look bad, Democrat versus Republican, bad versus good. And this is where it gets interesting because Senator Murray also went after Chairman Johnson for calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Now, the chairman said Social Security is an illegal Ponzi scheme, and Senator Murray responded by saying Social Security is a program that millions of hardworking Americans have paid into their entire lives. And she's right about that. People did pay into it. They worked for decades, and they were promised that money would be there when they retired. That's real. That matters. But here's the thing. Both things can be true at the same time. Social Security can be something that people paid into and deserve to receive, and Social Security can also be structurally broken in a way that looks a lot like a Ponzi scheme. Think about it like this. A Ponzi scheme is when money from new participants gets paid out to early participants, and the whole thing collapses when there aren't enough new people coming in to cover the promises that they were made. And I'm not saying Social Security is a crime. It's not. It's a law. But the math works the same way. For decades, there were more workers paying in than retirees taking out. That worked fine. But now you got baby boomers retiring in huge numbers. Birth rates are dropping, and the ratio of workers to retirees keep getting worse. Eventually, the money runs out unless something changes, right? Then that's not a political opinion. That's how can I put it? Arithmetic. And when you call that a Ponzi scheme, you're not attacking seniors. You're describing the math. You're saying the system was set in a way that worked for one generation and wasn't sustainable for the ones after it. Mind you, all of the fraud that take place within fake daycares and Medicaid fraud and hospice cares. I mean, do you really expect the money to be there for the next generation when they retire? And that's a conversation worth having because it seems as though not only did the retirement age keep going up, but then the cost of living to keep going up because the fraud that's happening behind Americans' backs. Just flushing our monies out like it's nothing and rinsing it like it's water for something we will never see that keeps getting further and further away for us that's supposed to be there when we retire. But if you keep in the name of taxation, now you got this new thing where you're calling successful people and wealthy people who pay the most taxes in this country villains for being successful and they don't deserve them a certain amount of money. Well, guess what? That's what capitalism is, ownership. And actually, if you do get them taxed, because they're the ones that create the jobs. So then they can expand their business to give more jobs and actually enrich the communities. Instead of government handouts, there will be more opportunity. Oh, but you don't want that. But then you wonder why Social Security comes off as a Ponzi scheme because a lot of people are saying, give me my money now. Don't take it out no more because I ain't never going to see it anyway. And in a way, the cost of living keep going up and all this fraud that y'all keep allowing to happen through all y'all back ends and all these things. It is a Ponzi. Okay, so what happens when I never see it? You guys take it anyway and just do whatever y'all want with it now. So just give me my money now and don't take it from me because then I'll never see it, right? So, from my perspective, this is where the double standard shows up. Senator Murray was happy to hold a hearing about Medicaid fraud. And she was happy to point out Trump's commutations. And she was happy to talk about $1 trillion in tax cuts from the top 1% that pay the most taxes in the world. But when Chairman Johnson pointed out that Social Security is mathematically unstable, she acted like that was an attack on every senior in America. Not to mention all the elder abuse with ballot harvesting and hospice cares that I keep talking about. And that's the kind of political theater that keeps people from having honest conversations about the budget. See, typical move, right? Don't take accountability, but deflect, attack, and defend. Or much better, okay, if we're going to talk about fraud, how about I just, instead of talking about the current accountability that should take place, let me actually make the concern a problem and blame Trump for it. So the simple fact is now that we're no longer talking about the current concern, but because it's Trump's fault that this happened in the first place. So I can basically change the topic, remove the accountability of actually talking about the current situation, and then on the simple fact of that, twist it and make it as though the concern that's being brought up is Trump's problem. Lack accountability as a leader.
That is the math, and that is out and out grift. So it seems to me like the biggest Medicaid theft didn't happen in a billing office somewhere. It actually happened last year, right here in the United States Capitol, when Republicans passed Trump's big, ugly bill. So, Mr. Chairman, let me just say, I find it pretty astounding that Republicans are holding an entire Senate hearing on fraud in Medicaid, but they don't seem to have anything to say about the fraud coming out of the White House. I mean, look at the crypto schemes and the foreign gifts. That's easily the most corrupt White House in American history. So the President Trump pardoned convicted criminals who committed Medicaid fraud. This is outrageous to me, and it is what we should be talking about. But I also want to note a really big difference.
Yes, that is speaking in regards to the problem of basically a lot of people. This is why a lot of individuals, I spoke to individuals and a lot of Americans saying, look, we don't need women leaders because the moment they're confronted by the issue or something that's happening or done, that's why I'm saying call out the fraud on your side as well, Miss Patty, that she doesn't appreciate, right? Or like, rather than accepting accountability as a leader, I'm sorry, we'll work on this together. We need to do better and stop fraud. We'll grow together. Instead, she'll just either blame Trump in this case for being a reason why she did why it's happening. I should say, not what she did, but or two, she'll just like she's doing now, will acknowledge it, the fraud, the Medicaid fraud, um, in regards to the complaint, and rather than accepting accountability as both from both parties and making this a bipartisan thing, let's just bring up something that Trump did and rather be current or in the past that upset her. In this case, Miss Patty, it turns personal and shift the dynamic, and now we make it feel like it's all Trump fault and to be held accountable, and Republicans are bad for something that is completely unrelated to Medicaid fraud. That's what she's doing.
terms of values and beliefs right now.
A lot of people would say typical woman, right? I'm just saying, just having a conversation. A lot of people would say, they say, women just don't know how to take accountability. And this is why some people disapprove of women leaders.
Because I am here, and I know my colleagues on this side are, to fight for our safety net programs. But my
And I'm not attacking women. I'm just speaking on what the majority would say. Because I come across people that say, oh, we don't need women leaders. We don't need women priests. I'm just speaking on understanding their perspective justifiably as having a conversation together, family. That's all, right?
colleagues on the other side of the aisle are not with me on that fight. Chairman Johnson has said repeatedly he believes Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Last week, another Republican senator was on the floor saying Social Security is a scam. So I wanted to make really clear at this hearing, I cannot disagree more strongly, Mr. Chairman. Social Security is a program that millions of hardworking Americans have paid into their entire lives. So Republicans might want to cut benefits or privatize Social Security, but I want you to know I'm going to keep fighting to save Social Security and protect health care for our Americans. That is pretty bad. Following what was dubbed, quote, the largest health care fraud scheme charged by the U.S. Justice Department, valued at over $1 billion in Medicare and Medicaid fraud, Trump commuted the 20-year sentence of a Florida nursing home and assisted living facility executive. So that's even worse. So look, I'm all for major crackdown fraud. I think we all are, but it looks like we've got some pretty good leads starting in the White House. Mr. Schneider, I want to turn to you. What single piece of legislation delivered the largest cuts to Medicaid in American history?
Last year's budget reconciliation bill.
Yep, so everybody knows Republicans' big ugly bill passed more than $1 trillion in health care cuts, mostly to Medicaid. Mr. Schneider, how much in tax breaks for the top 1% did Trump's bill contain?
Approximately $1 trillion.
$1 trillion in tax cuts to the top 1%. Mr. Schneider, how many Americans are losing health care because of Trump's big ugly bill?
So in terms of the Medicaid cuts, the latest estimates are approximately 11 million.
11 million.
Well, if you go to work, you'll get health care benefits, right? And the simple fact is also what they're not adding is the context. They're just saying general statements. Because the simple fact is, oh, tax cuts to the top 1%. But you don't know what the incentive was to create more jobs. Obviously, there had to be a stipulation for it, but we all know that the top 1% pay the most taxes in the country and they create the most jobs and opportunity. So if that's the case, then if you cut the taxes, then they'll be able to create more opportunity because obviously they already pay the most taxes. So they're going to want to seek more tax breaks. So they're going to want to spend more money they have. No wealthy person who owns a business keeps all the money to themselves. Also, they usually say, oh, I don't have no money. My business has money. or my business is successful, or they'll name their business name, so and so and so LLC has money. I don't have money as a person individually, right? Or they may pay themselves a certain salary from that business, but it's not actually their money. It's just the value of that company. Now, with also that being said, if you're able bodied, like I mentioned, and you're able to work 20 hours and you're young, and a lot of individuals don't want to work. And there's also been a study I've seen came out recently that there's a lot of stay-at-home boyfriends all of a sudden now, and the more women are going to work in the workforce. So you'll get your 401ks, which also um actually helps out because if you can match that, right? If you can match your 401k and get that free money from your job and match it, you actually set yourself up for retirement. And the simple fact is, they want to defend Social Security and Medicaid fraud, but you realize a lot of dead people was on Social Security, so they want to keep the things that was actually enabling the fraud to use as loopholes, in which it was making the cost of living go up, which is why we have to drain the swamp. But she don't want to have that conversation. She just want to make Trump the bad guy. Republicans is taking away a lot of Medicaid from individuals who or won't be able to take care of themselves, or they're dying, right? Dramatically, right? Emotional escalation, right? Fear mongering, right? And that's the kind of political theater, like I said, that keeps people from having honest conversations about the budget. Because if you can't even acknowledge that the numbers don't add up, how are you supposed to fix anything? You can't fix the problem. You refuse to name, and you can't have an honest hearing about fraud if you're only wanting to point at the other side's scandals while ignoring the structural problems that both parties have created. Now, when you look at this, the elephant in the room that Senator Murphy brought up, right? Or Murray brought up, the so-called big ugly bill that Republicans passed. According to her, the bill cut more than $1 trillion from healthcare, mostly from Medicaid, and gave $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%, right? Like I mentioned. She said 11 million Americans will lose healthcare because of it. And those are serious numbers. They deserve serious discussion. But here's what I noticed. She didn't talk about what's actually in the bill. She didn't talk about, like I said, the work requirements that were attached to some of those programs. She didn't talk about whether some of those cuts were designed to reduce waste and fraud, as I mentioned. And she didn't talk about the fact that many of those cuts were phased in over years, not immediate. And she just said 1 trillion in cuts and 1 trillion in tax breaks, and 11 million people lose their coverage. And when you hear those numbers without context, they sound devastating. But here's what it looks like in real life. When the government says it's cutting $1 trillion from Medicaid over 10 years, that doesn't mean they're taking $1 trillion out of the economy. It means the rate of spending increases is slowing down. It means the program isn't growing as fast as it was projected to grow. And that's a very different thing from cutting existing benefits from people who already have them. And I'm not saying the bill was good or bad. I'm saying the way it was described in this hearing was designed to sound as bad as possible, not to inform people about what it actually did. And this is where the bigger conversation comes in, because if you're going to hold a hearing about fraud and you're going to bring up the big ugly bill, then you should also be willing to talk about the fact that fraud and entitlement programs didn't start with that bill, and it won't end with it. The Government Accountability Office has been putting Medicaid and Medicare on their high risk list for years. The improper payment rate for Medicaid has been over 10% in some years. And we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in overpayments, payments to dead people that I mentioned, payments to services that were never provided. And that's been happening under administrations of both parties, under Congresses controlled by both parties. So when Senator Murray sits here and acts like the only fraud problem is Trump pardons and a Republican budget, she's leaving out decades of bipartisan failure. And she's leaving out the fact that her own party has been in charge of oversight for plenty of those years, but she's a rhino, right? And she's leaving out the fact that real entitlement reform, real fraud prevention, and real accountability will require both parties to give up some of their favorite talking points. Think about it like this. If you really want to stop Medicaid fraud, you don't need a hearing. You need better data sharing both states. Between states. Um, Better verification. And we already see sanctuary cities in blue states more so than ever don't want to hand over their data, voter rolls, et cetera, et cetera. But we need better verification. They're fighting against voter ID. But we got Zoran Mudami over there about to have a government ran store that needs an ID. But better verification for who's enrolled, better technology to catch suspicious billing patterns. We have some of these sanctuary cities and blue states who are running traditionally off of paper and not digitizing the welfare system, so individuals can't get caught, right? Wonder why there's been a DMV glitch, right? With New Jersey, for example, with 6,600 people, possibly more, that basically were on the voter rolls to elect their governor who's been in office for a year in New Jersey. Hmm. So, where's the actual consequence for providers who abuse the system? Election integrity, Medicaid. This is a big thing wrapped in one, baby. Those aren't partisan ideas. These are common sense, but they don't make good for television, right? They don't give you a clip you can post on social media. They don't let you say the other party is corrupt and yours is pure. And that's a problem with political theater. It feels good in the moment, but it doesn't actually fix nothing. It just keeps the cycle going. So Senator Murray also made a point about values and benefits. Says she's fighting for the safety net programs while her colleagues on the other side are not with her on the fight. And look, there are real differences between the parties on entitlement spending. Republicans have been talking about cutting and reforming these programs for decades, right? Honestly, trying to preserve the American dream that's been taken away from these Democrats. If you want to be honest, because it used to be if you worked a job, you have money in your check and you can build something from nothing. But now the simple fact is entitlement programs has been seen as a way of work, which is not actually work, to seem as though that is the way for you to basically build yourself up in a way of living. When all it is really government control because they want to control you. Look at it. Look at how they took away the right to repair your own vehicle. They were going to force individuals to run full electric vehicles in a certain time under Biden instead of letting the market decide. Right? They were going to also have programs where like the Green New Deal, right? So when you look at that, Democrats have been talking about protecting them for just as long, what has been working, and Republicans have been talking about reforming programs. But here's what doesn't help: pretending that your party has clean hands and other sides are only responsible for the mess. Because the truth is, both parties have had power, both parties have passed budgets, and we got a president that's trying to fix everything within the 4 years he has left. And our country is under attack. And I'm not fear mongering at all. We got individuals with ideologies, and they're basically installing these senators and these part of these Democratic socialist, this Democrat Socialist Party, right? Democrat Socialists of America in the name of communism, right? Who are putting their ideologies and try to take away the true value of America. And actually, if you look at all these programs and we cut the spending, you have more money in your check to actually give you a leg up, and actually the hard work and what you're putting in going to work, you can actually have breathing room to actually invest, to build yourself up, to actually pass generational wealth, invest in a skill, and continue to move forward while also living the American dream to have your house and your family. But it's so far gone because these Democrats have named it evil in the name of entitlements and handouts and Medicaid. I don't know how many times I have seen from anecdotal experience. Oh, well, we'll give you more benefits, mom, if you get the dad out the house. They demonized success. They have demonized families, which is actually, family is actually the trueness of being healthy. Family is healthy. But both parties have watched the trust funds run dry without doing anything meaningful to stop it. And both parties have used hearings like this one to score points instead of solve problems. And that's why Trump was considered a threat. And you have to ask yourself, you don't have to agree with everything our president does, but respect the presidency. And we, the people, have spoke and they voted the way they voted. And that's why he's the president. However, you have to ask yourself why one man they want to attack so much from a bipartisan standpoint. And they're blocking everything he's trying to do. So from my perspective, that's the real fraud. The fraud is pretending that a hearing about waste and abuse is actually about waste and abuse when it's really about making the other side look bad and Trump derangement syndrome. And the fraud of using concern for working families as a weapon instead of a guide. And the fraud of talking about accountability while refusing to apply it to your own side. And that's what I saw in this hearing. A senator using her time to attack the other party, bring up pardons, to bring up tax cuts, to bring up a budget bill, all of it designed to make Republicans look like they don't care about fraud. Meanwhile, the actual work of preventing fraud and the boring work of fixing systems and updating technology and improving oversight that barely got mentioned because it doesn't fit the narrative, all right? And that's the thing I want you to understand, family. This isn't about one party being worse than the other. Both sides done this for years. Both sides held hearings designed to create viral moments instead of solutions. I mean, look at John Thune acting like we don't have the votes, as I have covered. Go check that video out, to pass the SAVE Act. Come on, man. But that's why I say that's an example of both sides and rhinos chose which fraud they care about based on which party's in power, and regular people are the ones who lose. And you lose because the system stays broken and the trust fund keeps running out. And you lose because the politicians go on TV, say the right things, then go back to doing nothing while the problems get worse, right? Typical politicians, but Trump is not one. That's why he was a threat. So when I watch a hearing like this one, I'm not looking for who won the argument. I'm looking for who actually has a plan, right? And I'm not seeing one. I'm seeing a lot of finger pointing, a lot of righteous anger, holier than thou, a lot of selective memory. But I'm not seeing serious proposal to fix the fraud, to save uh the entitlement programs, actually individual who gets the help and should be on the programs, verifiable wise, and to hold anyone other than the other side accountable, you know. So I'm gonna close with this that applies to all of us, whether you're spiritual or not. There's a verse in the book of Luke that says this: "For nothing is hidden that will not become evident, nor anything secret that will not be known and come to light." And here's why that matters for this conversation. You can hold a hearing, you can make speeches, you can point fingers, you can change the subject, but eventually the truth comes out. The numbers don't lie forever. The math doesn't change because you refuse to look at it. And the people who are supposed to be watching the door can't hide forever behind political talking points. The verse is about accountability and is about the fact that you can't keep a broken system hidden forever. Eventually, the receipt showed up, and that's why I believe it is happening right now. And people are starting to ask questions. They're starting to look at the numbers themselves, and they're starting to realize that both parties have been playing games with their money, their healthcare, and their future. And that awareness is the first step toward real change. And I just love these videos and having productive conversation, about life and the next generation and things like that. But it also makes you wonder why they were so against Elon Musk and actually AI innovation, because we can mine this information out faster than ever to mine through the mainstream liberal media and their propaganda. You ever thought about that, family? I'm sure you have. I mean, you guys are smart. Smarter than me, man. Look, I'll be sitting here researching and trying to figure out what I'm gonna type up and write up to do these things, and I hope that I'm adding some value into your life. But for those who aren't spiritual, accountability, this is the life wisdom. Accountability isn't about who gets caught. It's about who willing to look in the mirror. In this case, both parties have some mirror time coming. The Democrats have the answer to why they've been in charge or oversight for years and the fraud is still there. The Republicans have the answer for why they keep promising to fix the system and then passing bills to make the math worse, right? Um, and this doesn't go for all. You have some Democrats who woken up. John Fetterman has woken up a lot, and so yeah, and we as voters have to vote, have to answer for whether we're going to keep rewarding the theater or start demanding actual solutions. And that's the real choice. Not handouts, but actual solutions in the long run. So many people are so caught up on the now, the short term, but not seeing the bigger picture, which is why the consequences long term catches up with you. Everybody wants things now. And I think it's just phones as well, right? Instant gratification, delayed gratification, right? Is always the best way. We have to endure, right? Enduring, right? The slow race is always the best race. That's why I love turtles. Not to get off topic, but hopefully I add some humor or whatever. I'm just rambling, but having a conversation at the same time. I enjoy this. I enjoy just talking with you guys and kicking it, right? But keep cheering for your side while the system burns, or start paying attention to who's actually trying to put out the fire. So here's my question for you, family. Do you think either party actually wants to fix entitlement fraud, or do they both benefit from keeping it broken so they can keep campaigning on it? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications, spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate. And I understand no party is perfect, but you have to pick one. You can't sit there and just do the easy cop out. That's my challenge to you. Don't say, oh, both parties lie. We just need a whole new party. No, you have to give me one, and a valuable, a true reason. Like, do you think either party actually wants to fix the entitlement fraud, or do they both benefit from keeping it broken so they can keep campaigning on it? Be honest. On that note, family, peace.